Hi, welcome to Sewing with Sandy. Today we're going to work on McCall's 8563. I made these shorts and then this little top over here. So version B on the top, version A on the top and version C on the bottom. I love this pattern. I made it thinking it was pajamas because this is loungewear, but I used this stretch cotton from Mood and it's got some body to it. It's an absolutely adorable coordinating set, so I won't be wearing it as pajamas. I'll be wearing it out. It's so cute. I had a couple of issues with the pattern. One of them, and part of that is because of my body shape, but part of it is because of the way the pattern's cut. And it's pajamas, so you want it to be loose, but the back swings out so far. And I have a little bit of a curve in my upper back, so this really sticks out. Now, if it was just pajamas, it wouldn't be a problem, but you can see how much of a curve this is cut on, so there's a lot going on there. So I'm gonna show you how to fix it in case you end up with the same issue, and I suggest that you make a muslin if you wanna make this to wear it as a top. If you're gonna make it as pajamas, of course you want it as loose as possible. But what I'm gonna do, because this is coming out so far, is 4 inches from the center back. I'm gonna go out 4 inches, and I'm gonna do this on, obviously, on the other side, but I'm going to just take a little dart. I'm gonna undo the hem, take in the dart, and then refresh the hem. And that's gonna make all the difference in how much swing there is in the back of this top, and it'll fall a little bit more smoothly on my body. I mean, you can see on just on the Judy alone how much of a difference that already makes, because it's not like falling way out. And I'm probably gonna take a good 2 inches on each dart because it's really wide. And then you just go up to, you know, sort of, you want them even, right? You want this part of the dart, the main part of the dart, 4 inches on center from the center back. So there's some measuring involved in that, and you want them to be straight, obviously. So again, take the hem down, make the dart, then put the hem back up again, and that will alleviate all of that extra fabric in there. But let me show you how to do it on the tissue. All right, to make the adjustment for the tissue, because I want to take this in a little bit, what we're gonna do is cut this. I cut the short length on this, it's folded under. We're gonna cut up the back a little ways, and then we're gonna cut over to the center back seam. We're not gonna go all the way through, we're gonna go really close, but not all the way through. We wanna keep it connected. And then overlap, this is the part that's too big down here, right? And we want to essentially make a dart in the tissue, and I want to take it in 2 inches. So I'm going to overlap it 1 inch. And then just tape it. So now my tissue is all set when I go to cut this again. The reason we cut an angle here, and you're going to have to go back and reinforce that, is it gives us the opportunity to move the tissue, because this is we can't just fold this. This is a flat pattern. It needs to stay flat. That's important for working with the fabric. So that's how you take the extra volume out of a top at the hemline for the front or the back. It's the easiest way to do it. Your hem stays intact. Your center back seam stays intact. We're just taking some of the volume out down here. So that's a pretty quick trick. That was super easy, and I love the pattern. Here are the shorts. They have such cute little ruffle detail. This fabric is just amazing. It's a stretch cotton, and the leopards, I mean, come on, they're just too much. So perfect. The shorts are a great length. They're super comfy. They have a nice waistband. I made a few changes in the pattern. You knew that would happen. But yeah, I like the way it went up. I like the way it fits, and it's a good option. So let's get started. Okay, we're gonna start with the top. And the first thing we're gonna do is do stay stitching. And the reason you do stay stitching is so this curved edge that you cut doesn't stretch out. So on piece 1, we're going to do this front leading edge, and on each of these pieces, we're going to just run a bead of stitching within the seam allowance. So this has a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So we're going to run it at like 3/8. It's just because this is cut on the bias a little bit. It's to keep it from stretching before we add the ruffle, because we're gonna be working with this. We're gonna add the ruffle, and we're gonna add the facing, and then we have to add the collar. And we're gonna do the same thing with piece 2. We're gonna stay stitch, open this up and stay stitch around this neckline. And then after we do that, we're going to sew the shoulder seams together. So we're going to place these, and again, I like to place everything right side up the way it's gonna look once it's sewn together, so I know that when I sew them, I don't sew them backwards, right? So I'm going to lay the back piece face up and then the 2 front pieces face up. So that way I know this is the way it's going to look. My armhole is here and my neck edge, and then fold these over and stitch this shoulder seam. And we're off to the races. Okay. All right, here's piece 3. Here's piece 3. It's this long ruffle. And we're gonna fold it in half and we're gonna gather it. So I pressed it wrong sides together, and I'm just going to run a gathering stitch, which is a basting stitch, the longest stitch you have, and I'm gonna run it. My seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, so I'm gonna run it at 3/8 and at 7/8, so I don't go over it when I stitch it with my finishing seam. So we're gonna go gather that. That's next. All right, the other thing, the next step that we're going to be doing is our ties, and they want you to fold these in half, right sides together, and stitch them down. Oh yeah, that's such a nightmare. And then turn them. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fold it in half and press it. Then I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna fold in the edges. So I'm gonna make my own binding and then fold it together so it looks like this. I am gonna make sure that before I do that, I fold in one edge and finish that. So this edge is finished. One edge is going inside the seam, so it doesn't need to be finished. And then that way I don't have to turn them inside out, which is a nightmare. All right, so this is what your strap is gonna look like when it's finished if you fold it over the way I do. So I press it wrong sides together, and I get a nice little crease in there. Then I fold the edges in to the crease, and then I can fold it in on itself and stitch it. You need to make sure that you take this one end that you want it finished and kind of fold in the corners, dump over the edge there, right? This is a little fiddly. Pins into your ironing board work really well, and then fold this over. So you get a nice clean, you want a nice clean finish on that finished edge, right? Okay, and then one edge is raw. So that's my tie, then they're all set to go. Now we're gonna go back to the ruffle. On piece 3, there are a couple of marks. There's this dot, and that lines up with the shoulder seam. And then if you mark these notches, which I don't bother to do, those match up with the notches on the front of the blouse. I really don't like it when you cut into your fabric. I don't think it's a great idea. So if you're gonna mark the notches, then take a chalk marker or use a pin. So here's my neck edge. My shoulder seams are sewed together. I pressed the seams to the back, and I'm going to lay my ruffle right on top of my dress. I'm gonna I'm gonna match up these pins that I marked where the dots were for my shoulder seams. And then this dot gets lined up, this piece gets lined up here. All right, to the edge where this cuts off, right? There's another dot there, and you line it up there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to pull these strings, the tails that I left. I'm gonna pull one side. To gather this. This fabric is a little stiff. It's a heavier weight for a pajama, so it's going to make a beautiful ruffle, but I'm going to have to do some work tugging this all the way around. I'm gonna get it all the way around so this matches to here, and then this all fits in here, and this all fits in here. And then I'm going to baste it on just shy of the seam allowance, because when I add my facing on, I don't want to have to rip out the stitches. So this is going to take a while. I'm going to go put this ruffle on. All right, you can see there's a lot of gathering on this. And this is a stretch woven, keep that in mind. So it's not really classic pajama fabric. So it is a little heavier, but I'm okay with that. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for something with some weight to it. The other thing you're going to do now, next, this is all basted down. You can see my strings everywhere. Strings drive me nuts. You want to also make sure that you ended these in the same spot. So if you line up the bottom, right, you want to make sure that you didn't miss here before you move on, because ripping it out now is a lot easier with a basting stitch. And you also want to check, I had to rip out a section around the back of the collar because I had picked up some of the fabric that I wasn't supposed to. Then we're going to add our ties, and these are we're going to take the raw edge and we're going to add them right underneath where the ruffle ends. Now, if you're worried about where this is going to close on you, you can add more ties, make more, add a couple more, move this around. That is totally up to you, and that is part of the design process, because you want to make sure this is going to end up where you want it. For me, it's not an issue because I'm going to wear a black tank underneath this probably for a little extra support and comfort. So one tie is perfectly fine. But this is also certainly cute enough to wear as a top. So you might want to keep in mind where that's going to go. So we're going to sew both of those on. I have to finish stitching this one, but we're going to sew both of those on going this way, because once we put the facing on, we want them to face forward. And since we're doing top A, we're going to skip all the way down to step 12. And so after I've gotten all that done, I'm going to flip it around and sew the side seams together. So many strings with this. Sew both of the side seams together. So in the process, while I'm at my machine, I'm going to sew my facings together. You go this way. So I'm going to sew these shoulder seams on the facings together and finish this outer edge. For me, that's going to be running it through the overlocker. You could turn it, you could do a blanket stitch, whatever you prefer. You're going to finish this edge that's going to be on the inside of the garment. All right, now we talked about applying the facing, right? We're going to, apply this on. If you want to use facing, sew it all the way down. It has a jacket style hem. I don't like facings. And if you look at your ready-to-wear garments, you're going to find that they, in general, the expensive ones don't have a facing on them. So I'm going to bind this front edge with some bias binding, very similar to the way that they have you do the sleeve. And what I have this leftover, very stretchy, silky fabric. It's a poly blend from a skirt that I made, and I'm going to use this. So I cut bias strips from this, and I'll link the information on how to make a bias strip below. But I just made 1-inch bias strips, and that's what I'm going to use to finish off my edge. So I've trimmed my seams so it's super narrow, and this fabric is a little stretchy, so I can get away with this. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this right sides together, and I'm just going to stitch it all the way around. And when I'm finished, I'll have something that looks like this. And then I'm going to understitch it, which is to stitch the binding to the seam allowance. And you can see that that stitching is there. And then I'm just going to fold over the binding over the seam and then turn it inside and top stitch it. And what's going to happen is I'm going to have this really pretty finish on the inside. It's not going to be scratchy, so it's not going to wake me up when I'm sleeping, and it looks neat and clean, and the edges are all taken care of. So that's that. The sleeve we need to deal with, and they want you to double roll the hem on the sleeve. If you have to do that, that's fine. If you have an overlocker, I would suggest overlocking it and single rolling it. It's much easier to get a really nice curve with a single roll. Once you start doing this double roll now it gets a little more bulky and a little more challenging. So if you can make it a single, do that. I folded the sleeve in half, put a pin. These sleeves are symmetrical, and that pin up where the halfway mark goes is attached to the shoulder. So if I have my sleeve, my top facing this way, pieces everywhere. Top facing this way, here's my sleeve. This pin is gonna match with the shoulder. So I'm just gonna pin that on. And again, because this fabric is a little stretchy, I didn't have to clip into it or to stitch that 5/8 of an inch seam channel that they talk about, the seam there. I just pinned it along the curve. And they're both curved. I mean, they should go together. They're both curving the same way. So I sewed that on without any trouble, and then added my bias binding all the way around. So now my sleeve is actually finished, and I'm going to do just what I had said with the other one. I'm going to fold this under and then top stitch it. You will see the top stitching. If you don't want to see the top stitching, you can stitch it by hand. That would be another alternative. And then I'm going to hem it. And you could also do a bias binding on the hem. That would be really cute. Yeah, and that's it. And our top is done. How cute is this top, right? Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get the shorts. And you know, for what's supposed to be a pajama set, it's really gonna end up almost being like a coordinated set. So we'll see what happens once we get the shorts made, whether it's really gonna be jammies or not. It's so cute. All right, the shorts. All right, so we're gonna work on the shorts, and the first thing we're gonna do is the little ruffle that goes on the pocket. So we're gonna take these pieces and we're gonna run our gathering stitches at 3/8 and then at like 7/8. And also we're going to finish one edge of the ruffle. All right, so here's piece 16. I have turned the edge, finished it, and then have 2 rows of basting stitches here. And I'm just going to ruche that and pull it so it's gathered and lay it on piece 15. Now make sure piece 15 has a pocket and a crotch seam. So don't put it on the crotch seam. You don't want a ruffle there. Put it on the pocket seam. And you also don't need to gather the section that's going to be the seam allowance. You can leave that flat on both ends. It'll create less bulk in your seams. So I'm going to go ahead and baste this on, and then we're going to add our pocket. All right, so now my pocket is stitched on, my pocket ruffle is stitched on, and I am going to add my pocket bag, which is piece 17. So that looks like this. And I'm going to add these right sides together. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch this down. Now the best way to do a curved seam and get it even is to just go slow. I mean, even I go slow around a curved seam. There's not a lot that you can do to go fast and make it look good. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this. I'm going to finish the edge with my overlocker, but you could use a zigzag. You could trim it and use a zigzag. Put a few clips in here so it opens up, and then we're going to understitch it. All right, so I sewed this seam. I used the overlocker on it, and then I trimmed it because it's kind of a curvy seam. I clipped into the seam every inch or so. Then I want to understitch it. So in order to do that, you open up the pieces and you want to run a stitch on the pocket with the seam allowance. So you don't catch the pant front or the ruffle, just the pocket bag and the seam allowance, and stitch that all the way around. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do is take out all of my basting stitches, and I'm gonna take this to the iron and give it a really good press, because I want this ruffle to lay down this way, right? So we want to see the ruffle on the outside against this, not against the pocket, which I think would probably be easier because the ruffle naturally tends to go towards where the pocket is going to be. But I looked at this several times, and the ruffle definitely faces down. So I think that's kind of an interesting take. After I've pressed it and make sure the ruffle goes the right way, we're gonna go back and add the pocket bag in, which entails folding this in half, and I'll show you how to do that. And we end up with something, you have to kind of trust the process. We end up something looking like this. But this, for me, I think if I did these again, I would just turn the ruffle over and have it go the other way, because this makes so much more sense. I'm not fighting it. And this way, the ruffle is never gonna stay down. I'm gonna have to go back and stitch that, I think. I don't see how that ever is gonna stay down, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, we've understitched. I pressed the heck out of this ruffle, and I know it's going to flop up. It's going to drive me bananas, but we're gonna proceed from here. I've understitched the pocket to the seam allowance and pressed it to the back. So I have a really good press, made sure that I got a nice edge on my ruffle here. And now we're gonna fold the pocket back to the edge of the seam, the side seam here. And we're gonna sew this bottom seam here on our pocket. I don't know why I'm pinning that underneath. I'm gonna sew this bottom seam on our pocket, and this is what creates our pocket. So it's all one piece. So we're gonna stitch that seam, and then we're gonna fold it back, and we're gonna baste this edge. Let me flip it over so you can see it. We're gonna baste this edge down so it becomes one unit all together, right? And across the top also. So you want it to lie nice and smooth. And this way, when you sew the side seam, it'll all be the way it's supposed to be. You won't have to futz with it, right? And now you have this beautiful pocket, right? So this one's finished. You can see I've basted down these edges here so they're nice and flat. So now when I go to sew my waistband and my side seams, it's all one unit. And the other thing I did, because this pocket I know is gonna drive me crazy, my machine has a stitch where it goes up and down in the same spot. It's like a little tack. So in 3 spots, right on the top stitching here where I did the edge, I tacked it down so it's not gonna go anywhere. That's gonna keep me from going absolutely crazy with the pockets. So after that is taken care of, we're just going to start sewing our pants together the way we normally would. So once we have our pockets together, we're gonna lay piece 17 out, right side up. This is our inner leg seam, right? These are both front pieces. We don't wanna sew those to each other. We wanna sew them to the respective back pieces. So I'm going to lay piece 18 right sides together and sew this little inner leg seam. All right, we have 2 pairs of front to back sewn at that inner leg. And I press one to the left and one to the right because I stitch them together, and it gives me the opportunity to butt this seam down here at the crotch. So now we're going to sew this crotch seam, and we're gonna start with that seam. So since one's pressed left and one's pressed right, I can just butt these together and I get a really nice fit there. Then I'm just gonna pin them all the way up. Right, stitch them. Do yourself a favor, at least from here to here, stitch them a second time. That gives you the option in case a seam lets go. I'm gonna finish them off, and you want to clip through the edges. Another reason to give yourself 2 seams, it gives you a little bit more structure, but the clipping will help you stitching this and opening it up. All right, so here we are, I've sewn the crotch seam. I have sewn a 2nd row in there, finished off the edges and clipped. And one of the things about butting these seams with one pressed one way and one pressed the other way is what you get is this beautiful section. And it's just good practice, right? So now we're gonna sew the side seams, and this is where you look at them and you say, oh, I have done it wrong, right? But you haven't. So you want to, these are the legs. This is the 2 back pieces. And then this is the 2 front pieces. Just kind of keep flipping them around till you get something that looks like a super big pair of shorts, right? Because we're gonna put elastic waist around these. So now we're gonna sew up these side seams, and this is why you've attached, you've pre-attached that pocket so it doesn't flop around, and it makes it like one piece, so it makes it much easier for us to do this. So I'm gonna sew up both of these side seams, finish them off, and press them to the back. Then the next thing we're gonna do is gonna work on the waistband, which is piece number 19. So you're gonna sew both ends of these together, but on one end, there's 2 dots, and you leave that open when you sew these pieces together because that's where you feed the elastic through. So I sewed a little bit up here, and I sewed down here so the dot section is open. And we're gonna fold this in half. I like to take it to the ironing board, and we're gonna fold it wrong sides together and just baste it in the seam allowance. Just so, again, it's one piece that we're working with. So we're gonna go take care of all that. Okay, side seams are done on our pants, and we wanna press that seam to the back because we have all this bulk from the pocket. Turn them inside right. All right, so there are my shorts. Here is my waistband. I have a one-way design, so I have to make sure that when I put this on, my cats are going up the right way. And I have this opening here to stick my elastic in. Okay. Now, the next step is to sew the waistband to the pants. And we're gonna use these openings, these seams for our side seams, but we have a center front seam and a center back seam, so we can match those up. So if we take our waistband and match up the side seams that we have on it, we can find the center front and we can find the center back. I always do my bands and bindings this way because if I make changes to the pattern, say I decide that these are too big and I make the seam allowance a little wider, this way I know that I've got it balanced and it's right. And then we're just going to make sure that we have our cats on, so they're looking face up. And then we put this on top, on top of our shorts. I just want to check and make sure my cats are facing up. And then I'm going to match the side seams and the center front seam and pin those and stitch this on. So that is pretty straightforward. Now, this calls for 1/2 inch elastic, and there's 3 channels inside here with the 1/2 inch elastic. After you sew the waistband to the pants, it asks you to sew 2 channels, 2 seams, 2 rows of stitching. So you have 3 openings to feed the elastic in. I'm going to use 1 piece of 2-inch elastic because that's what I have, and it will fit inside this casing without any trouble. After your elastic is in, you're going to, whether you use 1 or 3, you're going to overlap the edges of your elastic, and you're gonna do a step zigzag to close it off, and then hand sew that opening that you used to thread the elastic through. All right, I inserted my elastic. You wanna make sure if you have the 1 2.5 inch or 1.5 inches or the 3 pieces that they're flat, that's the same, you know, it's not twisted. And then you're going to use this little step zigzag stitch to attach these together. And you just slide it in there. And you want to balance the elastic all the way around the pants, shorts, whatever. And once you're happy with the way it's balanced, so once you're finished and you're happy with the way the elastic is balanced all the way around, you're gonna run a stitch in the side seams right in the ditch, and that'll help keep your elastic from twisting in the washing machine or when you're wearing it. And then you have to sew up that little opening. Mine happens to be on the outside because I needed my cats to stand up straight. So I'm gonna close up that little opening. And then I gave them a quick hem, short little hem, and they are done. They are ready to go. So can't wait to try them on.